It was supposed to be another perfectly choreographed royal ceremony. Inside the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, measured smiles, rehearsed movements, and centuries of protocol unfolding without interruption. But everything shifted the moment Prince Louis stepped forward. Courtiers froze. Senior royals exchanged startled glances. And for several breathtaking seconds, the youngest royal in attendance became the center of a moment no one inside the palace had prepared for. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For weeks, pressure had been building quietly behind palace walls. Public scrutiny surrounding the monarchy had intensified. Private tensions were reportedly growing among senior members of the family. And every public appearance now carried the weight of silent expectation. Even this ceremony, carefully arranged down to the smallest movement, had reportedly become a source of anxiety for royal aides desperate to avoid another unpredictable headline. Prince William remained composed as always. Princess Catherine carried herself with that familiar calm dignity the public had come to admire, and beside them stood Prince Louis, the youngest and often most unpredictable member of the Wales family, watched more closely than anyone realized. Palace staff had allegedly spent much of the morning preparing for the possibility that Louis might grow restless during the long formal proceedings. Aides quietly positioned themselves nearby. Senior officials exchanged cautious reminders. Every movement surrounding the young prince appeared tightly managed because inside royal circles, Louis had earned a reputation for bringing spontaneity into moments built entirely on discipline. Yet those closest to the family noticed something unusual almost immediately. He was quieter than expected. Focused. Observant. Instead of shifting impatiently or seeking reassurance from Catherine, he reportedly stood with remarkable stillness, studying every detail unfolding around him as though he understood the enormous weight resting over the palace that day. Then came the moment no one had anticipated. As one portion of the ceremony reached an emotionally charged pause, witnesses claimed Louis suddenly stepped slightly forward without prompting. It was not dramatic rebellion. It was something far more shocking. The young prince reportedly turned toward King Charles with an expression so serious, so unexpectedly aware, that conversations among nearby aides immediately stopped. Even Princess Anne, known for rarely betraying emotion in public settings, was said to have looked visibly startled. What happened next spread through palace corridors within minutes. According to whispers circulating among staff afterward, Louis quietly acknowledged his grandfather in a way that carried unusual emotional weight for a child his age. Some insiders later described the moment as deeply human. Others claimed it felt as though the young prince suddenly understood the burden carried by the family around him. What made the moment even more powerful was the reaction from William and Catherine themselves. Witnesses reportedly noticed Catherine's expressions soften almost instantly, her composure briefly giving way to visible emotion before she quickly regained control. William, often guarded during official appearances, allegedly looked at his son with unmistakable pride mixed with surprise, as though he too realized something profound had shifted. And King Charles, already navigating enormous personal and institutional pressures, was said to have paused longer than protocol normally allowed, his attention fixed entirely on Louis. By the end of the ceremony, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace no longer felt routine. Conversations became hushed. Staff members exchanged quiet observations behind closed doors. Some reportedly described the young prince as different. Others whispered that the palace may have witnessed the first real glimpse of a future royal beginning to emotionally understand the gravity of the institution surrounding him. And while the public only saw another formal appearance from the royal family, those inside the palace allegedly walked away believing they had witnessed something far more significant than a child behaving well during a ceremony. But what stunned the royal family even more than Louis's unexpected behavior was the private reaction that unfolded behind closed palace doors only minutes later. For years, Prince Louis had been viewed as the energetic wildcard of the royal family, the smiling young royal whose playful behavior often stole headlines during balcony appearances and public celebrations. But insiders had quietly begun noticing a dramatic shift behind the scenes. The laughter had become more measured. The once restless child now watched royal events with unusual focus, as though he suddenly understood the enormous weight attached to his family name. What many dismissed as simple maturity was beginning to look like something far more significant inside palace walls. Because according to whispers circulating among royal staff, the youngest Wales child was no longer being treated merely as the cheerful younger brother standing behind a future king. He was being prepared for something much larger, much earlier, and under far more pressure than the public could possibly imagine. As tensions surrounding the monarchy intensified over recent years, Prince William and Princess Catherine reportedly became increasingly protective of their children. Palace insiders claimed the couple grew deeply concerned about the emotional cost of royal life, especially after witnessing years of public attacks, family fractures, and relentless scrutiny surrounding the institution itself. Every appearance, every photograph, every small gesture suddenly carried consequences. And while George's future as king remained the palace's central focus, those closest to the Wales family allegedly understood that Charlotte and Louis would also carry enormous responsibilities, whether they chose them or not. That realization quietly changed the atmosphere surrounding the children inside Kensington Palace. Louis, in particular, was said to have experienced the most visible transformation. Once allowed to exist on the edge of royal formality, he allegedly began sitting in on more serious family discussions concerning duty, legacy, and public responsibility. Conversations that once happened behind closed doors were now unfolding within earshot of the young prince. Staff reportedly noticed how carefully he listened whenever discussions turned toward King Charles's health pressures, the future stability of the monarchy, or the growing demands being placed upon William and Catherine. There were even claims that senior aides had started encouraging all three Wales children to understand royal expectations years earlier than previous generations had. The reasoning, according to palace whispers, was painfully simple. The modern monarchy no longer had the luxury of waiting for childhood to end naturally. No one appeared more aware of that reality than Catherine herself. Behind her calm public image, insiders claimed the Princess of Wales had become intensely focused on preparing her children emotionally for the life ahead. Not through rigid lectures or cold protocol, but through quiet conversations designed to help them understand the emotional burden tied to their surname. Those close to the family reportedly described Catherine as determined to preserve her children's warmth and humanity, while also teaching them resilience before the outside world forced it upon them. And perhaps nowhere was that effort more visible than in Louis's recent behavior. The sudden stillness, the unusual composure, the way he now observed royal gatherings with an expression that sometimes appeared startlingly mature for his age. That was why the palace ceremony carried so much hidden significance behind the scenes. To the public, it appeared to be another carefully managed royal appearance. But according to insiders, several senior aides privately viewed the event as an unspoken test of Louis's composure under pressure. There would be no formal announcement, no acknowledgement from the palace. Yet those watching closely allegedly understood that the young prince was being quietly observed by some of the most experienced figures inside the royal household. Could he remain focused during emotionally tense moments? Could he carry himself with restraint despite the suffocating pressure surrounding the monarchy? Could the once playful child suddenly step into a more serious royal role when the institution itself seemed increasingly fragile? At first, everything unfolded exactly as expected. Louis remained calm beside William and Catherine, composed in a way that reportedly surprised even veteran palace staff. But as the ceremony moved deeper into its most emotionally charged moments, subtle tension began spreading through the room. Conversations softened, expressions hardened, and somewhere beneath the crushing weight of royal expectation, something shifted inside the young prince that no one, not even those closest to him, had fully anticipated. And as the ceremony continued beneath glittering chandeliers and watchful portraits, the young prince would soon face a moment that no rehearsal could have prepared him for. The turning point came suddenly, and according to several palace whispers, it transformed the emotional atmosphere of the entire ceremony within seconds. As senior royals stood in silence during one particularly solemn moment, Prince Louis reportedly noticed something others missed. What happened next left even longtime palace staff visibly emotional. For a brief moment, centuries of royal formality seemed to disappear beneath the quiet instincts of a young boy. And those inside Buckingham Palace would later claim that the emotional impact of that moment lingered long after the ceremony itself had ended. By that stage of the event, tension inside the palace had already become impossible to ignore. The ceremony had carried an unusually heavy emotional tone from the beginning, shaped by months of uncertainty surrounding the monarchy and the visible strain placed upon senior members of the royal family. Every figure standing within that room reportedly understood the deeper meaning behind the occasion. It was no longer simply about tradition. It was about endurance, stability, survival. And at the center of that pressure stood King Charles, carrying the immense burden of a crown already tested by personal health battles, family fractures, and growing public scrutiny. According to palace insiders, there was one solemn tribute during the ceremony that seemed to affect the king more deeply than expected. Witnesses allegedly noticed a sudden shift in his posture as the emotional weight of the moment intensified. Though he maintained royal composure, those standing closest reportedly saw signs of exhaustion that could no longer be completely hidden. His expression tightened, his movements slowed slightly, and for several quiet seconds the strain appeared to break through the carefully controlled image the monarchy had worked so hard to preserve. Most people in the room remained frozen within the boundaries of protocol. No one moved. No one reacted openly. Royal ceremonies are built upon discipline, restraint, and silence. But then Prince Louis noticed what others either ignored or pretended not to see. Without prompting, and according to several whispered accounts from inside the palace, the young prince quietly stepped closer toward his grandfather. It was not dramatic. There were no words loud enough for others to hear. Yet the gesture itself reportedly carried enormous emotional force. Some insiders claimed Louis simply moved nearer, as though instinctively trying to comfort him. Others believed he briefly looked toward the king with visible concern, offering a kind of quiet reassurance that no protocol could have taught. Whatever truly happened in that fleeting exchange, insiders agreed on one thing: the atmosphere inside the room changed instantly. Several senior royals reportedly softened emotionally the moment they witnessed it. Catherine, who had spent months carefully protecting her children from the crushing pressures surrounding royal life, was allegedly seen fighting visible emotion as she watched her youngest son respond with such unexpected maturity. Prince William, often disciplined and unreadable during official events, reportedly looked momentarily stunned by the emotional intelligence Louis displayed under pressure. But perhaps the most striking reaction came from Princess Anne herself. Known throughout royal circles for her toughness and emotional control, Anne was allegedly seen lowering her gaze during the exchange, deeply affected by what she had witnessed. Palace staff later whispered that the Princess Royal appeared unusually shaken afterward, as though Louis's small act had exposed something painfully human beneath the institution's carefully maintained walls. Even longtime aides who had spent decades inside royal ceremonies reportedly described the atmosphere afterward as completely changed. The rigid formality that once dominated the room suddenly felt fragile, overtaken by something raw, personal, and impossible to rehearse. And that was precisely what left so many inside the palace unsettled, because according to several insiders, the emotional power of the moment had very little to do with royal protocol at all. Instead, it revealed a growing awareness inside Prince Louis that no one had fully expected to emerge so soon. The playful child once known for stealing attention with jokes and expressions had suddenly shown signs of understanding vulnerability, responsibility, and emotional burden in a way that startled even his own family. For senior royals already carrying fear about the monarchy's uncertain future, The moment reportedly felt both heartbreaking and strangely hopeful at the same time. But while the public only saw fragments of the emotional exchange, what happened afterward inside a private palace corridor revealed why senior royals were so shaken. Behind the velvet curtains and guarded palace corridors, the reaction to Prince Louis's behavior reportedly became far more emotional than anyone outside the monarchy realized. Senior aides who had spent decades protecting royal composure were suddenly whispering about the future of the institution. And according to several interpretations of the evening, one private exchange between William, Catherine, and King Charles carried a weight that few expected from such a young royal. Because once the ceremony ended and the formal smiles disappeared, what unfolded behind closed doors allegedly exposed just how deeply the moment had affected the family at the center of the monarchy itself. As senior royals quietly withdrew from the public areas of Buckingham Palace, insiders claimed the emotional atmosphere remained unusually heavy. The rigid discipline that normally followed official ceremonies reportedly gave way to hushed conversations and stunned reflection among aides. Some staff members allegedly described the corridors afterward as different, as though something emotionally significant had shifted inside the institution. And at the center of those conversations stood Prince Louis, the child many once viewed only as the playful younger royal, now being discussed in terms that sounded startlingly mature. According to palace whispers, William and Catherine privately praised Louis almost immediately after the ceremony concluded. While details remain closely guarded, several insiders claimed the Prince and Princess of Wales were deeply moved by the composure their youngest son displayed during one of the most emotionally tense royal events in recent memory. Catherine, who had reportedly spent years trying to shield her children from the harsher realities of royal life, was said to have become visibly emotional in private once the pressure of public duty finally lifted. For months, perhaps years, she had quietly carried fears about how the monarchy's instability might emotionally affect her children. Yet in that moment, insiders believed she saw proof that Louis possessed a level of emotional awareness no one had fully recognized before. But the reaction from King Charles reportedly carried the greatest emotional weight of all. Several interpretations from palace staff suggested the king appeared deeply affected by Louis's maturity throughout the evening. Behind the scenes, Charles had allegedly been navigating enormous personal strain, balancing his responsibilities as monarch while confronting the physical and emotional pressures that increasingly surrounded the crown. Those closest to him reportedly noticed how much the young prince's quiet gesture during the ceremony seemed to resonate on a deeply personal level. Some insiders even claimed the king became unusually reflective afterward, speaking softly about duty, family, and the emotional burden that royal life eventually places upon every generation, whether they are prepared for it or not. And it was not only Charles who appeared shaken by what had unfolded. Princess Anne, long regarded as one of the monarchy's strongest and most disciplined figures, allegedly made private remarks afterward about Louis's growing sense of duty and awareness. According to whispers circulating among senior aides, Anne reportedly observed that the young prince was beginning to understand far more about royal responsibility than many had assumed. Coming from someone known for her toughness and refusal to indulge sentimentality, the remark reportedly carried enormous significance inside royal circles. Palace staff later whispered that Anne's reaction alone convinced many insiders that the evening had revealed something important about Louis's future role within the family. At the same time, the emotional pressure surrounding the next generation of royals suddenly became impossible to ignore. For years, much of the monarchy's future had rested publicly on Prince George as the eventual heir. But behind palace walls, insiders allegedly began discussing the growing importance of Charlotte and Louis as emotional pillars supporting that future. Staff members reportedly started comparing Louis's instincts to older members of the royal family, known for their emotional intelligence under pressure figures who could steady a room not through authority, but through quiet presence and human connection during moments of crisis. That realization reportedly unsettled many within the palace because it exposed a truth the monarchy could no longer avoid. The younger generation was being forced to emotionally mature far earlier than expected, shaped by instability, public scrutiny, and uncertainty surrounding the institution itself. And while some insiders viewed Louis's behavior as a hopeful sign for the monarchy's future, others quietly worried about what such emotional awareness might ultimately cost a child still growing up beneath extraordinary pressure. Yet the deeper significance of the moment was not simply about emotion. It was about what Prince Louis may now represent during one of the monarchy's most uncertain periods in decades. The royal family has weathered scandals, betrayals, illnesses, and public battles over the last several years. But behind palace walls, an even deeper fear has reportedly taken hold, the fear that the monarchy's future may now depend on the younger generation carrying emotional responsibilities far earlier than anyone ever intended. And after the palace ceremony, whispers surrounding Prince Louis intensified dramatically. What began as quiet conversations among aides soon turned into something much bigger. Some insiders allegedly left Buckingham Palace believing they had witnessed the emergence of a royal figure capable of connecting with people in ways the institution desperately needs during one of its most uncertain eras. For years, public trust in the monarchy has been tested by relentless turmoil. Family divisions became global headlines. Health concerns surrounding senior royals shook the institution's sense of stability. Public appearances, once designed to project strength, increasingly carried undertones of exhaustion and pressure. And through all of it, the Wales children slowly became symbols of continuity in the eyes of both the palace and the public. George represented duty. Charlotte projected confidence and discipline. But Louis, once seen only as the playful younger prince, suddenly began drawing attention for something far more powerful: emotional instinct. According to palace whispers, the ceremony unexpectedly transformed public perception of Louis almost overnight. Royal commentators allegedly described the evening as a turning point, not because of protocol or speeches, but because of the quiet humanity the young prince displayed under pressure. Some insiders even began drawing comparisons between Louis's natural emotional awareness and the quality that once made Princess Diana so deeply beloved: the ability to instinctively sense emotion in others and respond without calculation or performance. Inside royal circles, those comparisons reportedly carried enormous emotional weight. Yet William and Catherine were said to remain determined to protect their children from becoming consumed by the institution itself. Behind closed doors, insiders claimed the couple continued focusing on keeping George, Charlotte, and Louis grounded, despite growing public fascination surrounding them. But by the end of the ceremony, it reportedly became impossible to ignore the attention shifting toward Louis in particular. And then came the final moment that left palace staff stunned into silence, as royal officials quietly guided family members toward private exits away from public view. Prince Louis allegedly paused before leaving and turned back toward King Charles. What followed was brief, deeply personal, and according to insiders, unforgettable. Several aides later described the exchange as genuinely moving. Louis was reportedly checking on his grandfather privately after sensing the emotional strain he had carried throughout the evening. And in response, King Charles allegedly reacted with visible affection and emotion rarely seen behind palace walls. Witnesses claimed the king's guarded composure softened completely in that moment, as though the weight of the crown briefly disappeared beneath something far more human. Catherine reportedly appeared visibly relieved afterward, emotionally overwhelmed by what the interaction seemed to reveal about her youngest son. Because by then, the ceremony was no longer being remembered for its official royal purpose at all. Instead, whispers throughout Buckingham Palace centered almost entirely on Prince Louis, the child few expected to emotionally define the evening in such a profound way. And as palace staff quietly reflected on what they had witnessed, one thought reportedly echoed through the corridors long after the royal family disappeared behind guarded doors. Sometimes the smallest royal presence can leave the deepest mark of all. By the following morning, whispers from inside Buckingham Palace had already begun spilling far beyond royal walls. Commentators, journalists, and longtime royal observers suddenly found themselves discussing Prince Louis in an entirely different light. The playful child, once known for funny balcony reactions and youthful mischief, was now being described as thoughtful, observant, and unexpectedly compassionate. And for a monarchy struggling through one of its most emotionally fragile chapters in decades, that shift in public perception carried enormous significance. Across social media and royal commentary circles, reactions reportedly poured in almost immediately. Many praised the young prince's emotional instincts and surprising maturity during such a tense royal moment. Others began comparing Louis to past members of the royal family who connected deeply with the public, not through authority, but through humanity. Inside the palace, insiders allegedly admitted they were caught off guard by how strongly the story resonated with audiences. At a time when headlines surrounding the monarchy had become dominated by illness, division, uncertainty, and public exhaustion, this single emotional moment suddenly reminded people of something the institution desperately needed to preserve human connection. And perhaps that was why the evening carried such extraordinary emotional weight behind closed doors. For all the grandeur of crowns, ceremonies, and centuries of royal tradition, the monarchy has always relied on something far more fragile than power alone. It depends on the ability of its members to emotionally connect with people during moments of vulnerability, fear, and uncertainty. And during that palace ceremony, Prince Louis unexpectedly reminded the royal family of that truth. Not through speeches, not through rehearsed appearances, but through one instinctive act of compassion that reportedly cut through the tension surrounding Buckingham Palace itself. According to Palace Whispers, William and Catherine privately viewed the moment as deeply meaningful not simply because of public reaction, but because it revealed something important about their youngest son during an extraordinarily difficult period for the family. For years, they had reportedly worked to keep their children grounded while preparing them emotionally for the enormous pressures surrounding royal life. And now, insiders claimed they were beginning to realize that Louis possessed a natural emotional awareness impossible to manufacture through protocol or preparation alone. King Charles was also said to be deeply affected by the younger generation stepping forward during such uncertain times. Behind palace walls, the monarchy reportedly understood that tradition alone would never be enough to secure public trust moving forward. Emotional symbolism mattered just as much as ceremony. Humanity mattered just as much as duty. And in one quiet moment, Prince Louis had seemingly captured both. By the end of the week, royal commentators were already describing the evening as a defining turning point for Louis's future public image. Palace staff allegedly began viewing the ceremony internally, not for its official royal purpose, but for the emotional shift it created surrounding the young prince himself. The child, once viewed simply as the energetic younger royal, had suddenly emerged as a comforting presence during a period of immense instability for the monarchy. But while the public celebrated the touching moment, those closest to the institution quietly understood something much deeper had unfolded behind palace walls. Because long after the ceremony ended and the corridors of Buckingham Palace finally fell silent again, insiders reportedly admitted that the most unforgettable royal moment of the night did not come from a king, a queen, or even an heir to the throne. It came from a young prince nobody expected to change the emotional atmosphere of the palace in such a profound way. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.